So good morning and welcome back to Classical Mechanics 1 at CMI. This is the 23rd meeting on 14 December, Tuesday, 14 December 2021. Regarding problem set 8, there were a few questions. The third question, you're only expected to calculate V squared upon C squared to estimate the size of relativistic effects. And in the first question about the pendulum, you're supposed to, the last part, interpret the solutions of the linear differential equation that you will derive for phi, and interpret those solutions and what they mean for the stability. You don't need to write some very extensive report on that, but you do need to interpret the solution. Any questions about this assignment or otherwise?
Sir, for the first question, can we write some conclusions when the initial position of the pendulum is not the highest point?
Sure. Yeah, you can write your conclusion.
It's very near the highest.
Correct. Yeah,
okay.
You can start nearby and then ask what happens.
Okay.
Correct. Yes. And of course, when you start, you need to start with both phi and phi dot at t equal to 0. So both are part of the initial conditions.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. So that was Milan Paul. Yes. Okay, so last time we had begun our study of special relativity and special relativistic mechanics, which is relevant when relative to an inertial frame, the speed of speeds of particles is small compared to that of light, or the speed of other observers, inertial observers, also small compared to that of light. Is comparable to the speed of light. That is the relativistic situation that becomes relevant when it is comparable to speed of light. When it is much less than the speed of light, then we come back to non-relativistic mechanics of Newton, Galileo. And we had mentioned that special relativity as proposed by Albert Einstein in 1905 is based on a pair of postulates mainly, and one is the principle of relativity, which is the statement that a law of physics holds in one inertial frame if and only if it holds in any other inertial frame. So this in the context of mechanics had been proposed by Galileo. So Einstein postulated that it must apply to all laws of physics.
Hello, sir.
Yes,
sir, yes, sir. I had one question, not related to this relativity.
Okay.
But regarding the EndSEM, sir, can I ask?
Okay, please go ahead.
Sir, have you planned to hold the EndSEM? I mean, when have you planned to hold it?
The scheduled date is Tuesday, 28th of December, 9:30 to 1:30. So that is the officially announced time. We will conduct it in an appropriate manner. The precise details are yet to be worked out.
Okay, sir.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you will need to solve some problems. I mean, answer some questions. Now, exactly how it will be done, we will. I will
Sir,
let you know.
actually on 28th of December, our computer end-sem has also been scheduled.
Is that true? Well, according to the schedule that has been the official one, I think it is. Anyway, we will go by the official.
Oh,
thing.
okay, sir. Okay.
Yeah, perhaps it has not yet been fully. Maybe the details have not yet been sorted out. If you're saying there's a clash, then that should be resolved.
Sir, sorry,
Yeah.
like you just mentioned an official schedule. Is that like accessible by us? Can that be accessed by us?
No,
Or
if it is not yet accessible by you, then it means I mean I have received an advanced version of it. Perhaps it has not yet been finalized. So then I think this discussion is a bit premature. Let us wait for the official one to be. Maybe there are some clashes and things are still being worked out.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so Nilabja, yeah, let us wait to see. Yeah, I mean, I don't know when your computer one is, and let us
Okay,
wait.
sure, sir.
Yeah. Okay, so the principle of relativity was one of the two postulates, and I emphasize that the principle of relativity doesn't say anything about the validity of Galilean transformation formulae. Yeah, how you transform from one inertial frame to another, how variables in one frame are related to the variables in another frame is a separate question, and that will be addressed later today or tomorrow or next time. All we are saying is that the laws of physics must hold in one frame if and only if they hold in another inertial frame. Ram Madhav asks, what did I say about the end-sem date? Okay, so the end-sem date has not yet been fixed. There was a tentative date of the Tuesday, 28th of December, but perhaps it is not yet finalized. It will be coordinated with other courses. Any other questions? All right.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes, Shubham Kumar, yes.
Sir, this is just for the sake of clarification.
Yes.
So the relativity principle of Galileo. So like I wanted to know that the Galilean transformation we can only apply to the laws of mechanics, right?
No, the Galilean transformation tells you the coordinates of an event in one frame given the coordinates of the event in another frame. It can be applied to any non-relativistic context.
So like, can we apply that transformation to like magnetic field forces, like that QB cross B?
Yes, you can apply it to that, provided you work in a context where the speed of your charge is small compared to that of light. Then it will still be applicable.
But sir, even if it's small, then the force will like there will be some problems, I think, in QB B cross B.
No, I don't know which problem you are discussing, but okay, see, one can discuss non-relativistic physics. The motion of charges, I mean, the original principle of Galileo is really for mechanics. Now,
Yes, sir, so
yeah.
Like, can we apply it even for small velocities for magnetic field forces, magnetic field?
Yeah, provided you work in a consistent small velocity approximation, there is a way to apply it there too. Yeah, but it will not be fully consistent because the full equations of electromagnetism are not invariant under Galilean transformations. So it will not be exactly correct. There will be discrepancies which will have to be ignored. But which will be suppressed if speeds are small compared to that. Yeah. Okay. So Vijay and Rai says Haskell and some on 28th December. Okay, so let us discuss this at some later on. I think no official announcement has been made yet. we will follow the overall pattern that the institute proposes. Okay, so that is the principle of relativity. In addition to that, Einstein's second postulate is that the speed of light in vacuum is the same constant c in all inertial reference frames. So this was the second postulate. In addition to these two postulates, Einstein was also guided by what one may call the correspondence principle, which requires that the laws of relativity, relativistic mechanics, transformation between frames, all of these should reduce to those of Newton and Galileo when speeds are small compared to that of light. So this is a consistency requirement. We are not throwing out Newtonian mechanics completely. That should be valid in its domain of applicability.
So
yes, Ripunjay, yes.
yes, sir. So I just wanted to clarify that the reason Galilean transformation formulas are not applicable in special relativity is because the fundamental law, or like Newton's law, is being changed over here, right? The idea is still the same with respect to the Newton's law. The new transformations will be there, correct?
Okay, let me clarify. The reason it doesn't work at the very heart is that it violates the constancy of speed of light. That is what we discussed previously. That is the incompatibility of Galilean transformation formulae with the constancy of speed of light. That is the reason we cannot maintain it. Now, that doesn't say anything about Newton's laws, first or second law for that matter. It is true that Newton's first law continues to hold in special relativity, and Newton's second law also holds in a suitably modified form. So they need to be modified slightly, but in spirit they continue to hold. What we mean by d by dt and so on has to be revised. Those laws have to be written in such a way that they are invariant under not Galilean transformations, but whatever replaces them, which are the Lorentz transformations. Is that this question you had?
Yes, yes, sir. And like in continuation to that,
Yes.
what exactly is it in the theory which basically makes the speed of light constant? As in, like, why is speed of light not constant in Newton's theory? As in, you get what I'm asking, right?
No. In Newton's theory, speed of light is also constant. It is just infinity. It is that particular constant. In Einstein special relativity, it is a different constant, a finite constant. So, I mean, that is a tongue-in-cheek answer to you. So what the problem with Galilean transformations is that they don't respect a finite constant speed of light that is the same in all frames. That is what they don't respect. Newton in relativity is okay with an infinite speed of light, and it is infinite for everybody. I don't know if you are okay with that answer.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, fine. Newtonian mechanics doesn't make sense if you assume that speed of light is some finite constant. No, that will not work. Okay. So anyway, good questions. Then what we began discussing is after establishing the incompatibility of Galilean transformations with the finite constancy of the speed of light, we went on to some concepts concerning simultaneity and the synchronization of clocks. So I described to you the so-called radar method or radar scheme of synchronizing clocks. And we had two observers who basically are at rest relative to each other. This was the simplest possibility. And we explained how they could synchronize their clocks. Basically, A sends a light signal to B and is informed of the time at which B receives the time signal, receives a light signal by reflecting it back to A. So this vertical line is the world line of A. So this is the frame in which A is at rest. So this is the position variable. So A doesn't move. and neither does B move relative to A. So both their world lines are upward pointing straight lines. And light rays which travel at speed C will at a constant speed will therefore travel along a straight line here. And if we work in units where C is 1, then the spatial distance covered per unit time is 1 in those units. So this slope will be 1 or 45-degree angle. So that is why the shape of the light rays trajectories world lines are at 45 degrees in this manner. Of course, they could move rightward or leftward. That's why they can reflect and come back. Yeah, and A and B have identical clocks, but just that the clocks may not be synchronized. And by requiring that A's clock read a value TA plus delta, which equals TB, we can ensure that the two clocks are synchronized. So TA is the time on A's clock before any synchronization. And then the signal goes out and comes back, and the time on A's clock would have advanced. We call that TA plus 2 delta. Just 2 delta is whatever time it took to go and come back. Then since the outward and inward journeys took the same amount of time, the midpoint is at TA plus delta, and we simply declare that the clocks are synchronized if TA plus delta is equal to TB. So A's clock has to be reset to synchronize it. And this was the picture for any other event, not necessarily along either of their trajectories. And this is how they would determine the time of an arbitrary event E, again by the same radar method. Yeah, now let me go to the next step. I want to discuss what are called inertial coordinates. These are coordinates in an inertial frame that can be set up by an inertial observer. In this case, let us say observer A or maybe observer O, using the radar method. So the radar method can also be used by an inertial observer O. And of course, when we say an observer, we always mean an observer equipped with a clock and the ability to send and receive light signals. Yeah. So such an observer can set up an inertial coordinate system for events. And this was, outlined by Einstein, but the particular setup we are discussing is due to Milne. So basically, let us take the simple situation where we have a one-dimensional space. Yeah, so that we can call that the x direction. And that is this way, one-dimensional space. So that is a line. The observer is located somewhere, and the observer is at rest. So we are looking at the frame in which the observer, in the observer's frame. So in that frame, the observer is at rest. And various events can take place along this line. Yeah, so a person can yawn when they are sitting here at some instant of time. Yeah, and a crocodile can wake up at some point, at some instant of time, and so on. Yeah, so observer O wants to assign space-time coordinates to all these events. So how does this observer go about doing it? And the method is again using this radar idea. So let us see how it works. So O sends out a light signal at some time t1 along the positive direction of the line. So this is our line, and let us suppose the person sends out a light signal towards the right. I mean, you choose some direction and you call that the positive direction. Now, of course, if T1 is too late, you may not be able to access certain events. So only events in the future can be dealt with. Of course, if you wanted some earlier event, you must go backward and send your signal even earlier. Yeah. Okay. So now this signal is received at an event E, and that light signal is immediately sent back towards O, arriving at a time T2 on the observer O's clock, the local clock. So that is shown in this figure. Light signal is sent out towards the event and then reflected back and received at a time T2. So it was sent out at time T1, received at time T2. Now, since the speed of the outgoing and returning light signals are the same by the principle of relativity, and they had to cover the same distance, yeah, in O's frame. They had to cover the same distance in O's rest frame. So O would declare that the event E prime on O's trajectory, on O's world line, at the time T1 plus T2 by 2 at O's location is simultaneous with E. Okay, so basically O is identifying an event on his own world line, which is simultaneous with the event E of interest. So the event E happened somewhere else, but O is identifying an event on his own world line, which is simultaneous with E. Now that event, due to the reasons just mentioned, happens at O's time on his clock, given by 1/2 T1 plus T2. Okay, so the conclusion is that O assigns a time coordinate to the event E given by 1/2 T1 plus T2. Okay, so this is what we mean by setting up a coordinate system. You must tell what the time of a certain event is. Now, that's not enough. You must also tell what is the spatial coordinate of that event E. So for the same reason, O assigns a distance C times T2 minus T1 upon 2. So these two journeys took the same time. So the distance covered at speed C would be C times the difference T2 minus T1 upon 2. So this was the time light signal took to reach E, and therefore the distance the light signal covered is C times that time taken. So that is the distance to the event. So for this reason, O assigns a distance C times T2 minus T1 upon 2 to the event E from the simultaneous event E prime. All right. So here we observe that we only define distances between simultaneous events. Okay. This matter will come up once again. You will see what we mean. Okay, so thus the inertial coordinates of the event E are given by T comma X ordered pair is equal to T1 plus T2 upon 2 and C times T2 minus T1 upon 2. So these are the coordinates that O assigns to the event E. So it is fairly simple idea. I encourage you to go over it once again in your spare time. And to complete this coordinate system, we say that events that occur on the other side of the line, say we were looking only the positive side of the line, this side, yeah, positive side. Also, there are events on this side. They will simply be assigned negative spatial coordinates. And finally, observer O itself will be assigned the coordinate x equal to 0 in this coordinate system. So these are called the inertial coordinates set up by the inertial observer O. I mean, this is just a nice way to think about things. I wanted to describe it to you. And to get used to, so we are basically doing what Ernst Mach said that Newton did not do. Newton did not think about such matters. How do you actually assign the time of events? Yeah, and Mach said there has to be some procedure involving physical processes. So this is that thing. So this is what this gap was filled by Einstein and the people who came after him. Okay, so Now I come to at first a somewhat counterintuitive idea, which also justifies the name relativity. And this idea is that the idea of simultaneity is relative. That is, events that are simultaneous for one observer may not be simultaneous for another observer. So this is the main message. That's what we mean by the relativity of simultaneity. So let me explain this in a couple of ways through examples. So first of all, what do we mean when we say that two events are simultaneous? Well, we have to immediately say they are simultaneous according to some observer. Otherwise, the meaning statement doesn't have any meaning. So two events, E1 and E2, occur simultaneously for observer A if they occur at the same time on A's clock. Okay. So you can use the Milne method to assign times to events. Then suppose there are two events, E1 and E2, and they occur at the same time on A's clock. A is the same as the observer O. Then we will say they are simultaneous as far as observer A is concerned. Yeah. Now, if now the above radar method of synchronization ensures that if B is at rest relative to A, then E1 and E2 are simultaneous for B as well. They're simultaneous for A, they are also simultaneous for B, provided B is at rest relative to A. Yeah. However, we will now show both through space-time diagrams and through thought experiments. Yeah, we will show that observers in relative motion need not agree on the simultaneity of events. Okay. So the synchronization of clocks doesn't work for observers in relative motion. In general, it doesn't work. Yeah, so they cannot agree upon simultaneity. So let me explain this in a picture. Okay, actually I want to do it in two ways, one through this picture and another through a figure, a thought experiment. Maybe the thought experiment is a little bit easier to understand, so let me describe that first. Yeah, so this is the sort of thing that Einstein used to think in terms of. So let us suppose we have a guard standing in the middle of an empty railway wagon of length 2L. So this is our railway wagon. It is of length 2L in its rest frame. The guard is standing in the middle and switches on his lantern, sending out a light pulse in all directions. Of course, they must travel at the speed c. Now, in the rest frame of the wagon, the light pulse arrives simultaneously at the left and right ends A and B of the wagon. Yeah, and because the distance is the same and speed of light is the same in both directions, so this distance to B is covered in a time L upon C, and this distance to A is covered in a time L upon C. So according to the guard on the wagon, the light reaches the two ends simultaneously. All right. So okay, so much for the guard's frame. Now let us view these events. When I say these events, I mean the event of the guard switching on the lantern and the two events when the light reaches the ends of the wagon. Okay, so let us view these events from a frame that is moving to the right at speed v relative to the railway wagon. Okay, so suppose according to this new observer who may be standing in the railway station while the carriage is moving, while the wagon is moving. So according to the observer on the ground, yeah, so the observer on the ground relative to the railway wagon is moving to the right. So in that frame, the railway wagon would be moving to the left with speed v. Okay, so that's shown in the second figure. The wagon was originally here, and has moved here. Okay, so the wagon is moving to the left according to the observer on the ground. Okay, now though the light pulse travels the same speed c in this frame, that is in the station observer's frame, ground observer's frame, it has to cover a distance shorter than L to reach the right end. Yeah, the wagon has moved to the left, so the left end of the wagon has moved further out, whereas the right end of the wagon has come closer to the point where the lantern was switched on. Therefore, in this frame, that is the ground frame, the light has to cover a distance shorter than L to reach the right end and a distance longer than L to reach the left end of the wagon. Therefore, in this frame, the pulse does not arrive simultaneously at the two ends of the wagon. Okay, so it's as simple as that. According to the observer on the ground, the light pulse does not reach the two ends of the wagon simultaneously. Yeah, so we have established.
Hello, sir.
Yes, please.
Sir, if we are checking for the simultaneity of the same event.
No, you need two events. You need two events to talk about simultaneity.
Sir, I mean, the event should be the same to compare, right? I mean, in the first case, we are actually seeing when does the light reach the point A, and in the second frame, the point A actually changes.
No, not the point A, the end of the wagon. We are talking, we have to speak physical quantities. So the two events that we are concerned with are the arrival of the light signal at the left end of the wagon and at the right end of the wagon.
Okay, sir.
Those are well-defined events, no matter which frame you look at them from.
Okay.
Yeah, but your question is very good because it places a great emphasis on identifying an event correctly. You have to identify an event through physical means, not through some label, because that label itself may change from frame to frame. Okay, good. Yeah, so I hope through this little thought experiment, the relativity of simultaneity has been conveyed to you. This is the first of the many surprises in special relativity. Okay, now I want to, okay, I mean, there is just a very parenthetical remark over here that is not so deep. Okay, I just want to mention that in a similar vein, it can be shown, and you have already done it, I think, in the homework, that events that occur at the same location but at different times, yeah, in one system may not appear to occur at the same location in a different frame of reference. So this was one of the problems in the earlier assignment. And yeah, and I can just remind you what it was. For example, suppose a guard standing at rest in a moving railway wagon flashes his lantern at t equal to 0 and t equal to 1 according to his clock. So the guard is on the railway wagon, not moving on the railway, just standing on the or sitting on the railway wagon, and flashes his lantern at t equal to 0 and t equal to 1 according to his timepiece. Then both these events happened at the same location, namely at the middle of the wagon, according to the wagon's frame. But from the viewpoint of an observer on the ground, the two flashes happen at two different locations since the wagon moves during the time between the flashes. Okay, so but this is already valid in Galilean Newtonian relativity. You don't have to go to special relativity to notice this. But the relativity of simultaneity is a new feature of special relativity. Okay, so having given this thought experiment to, or it's a counter example to establish that simultaneity is a frame dependent concept, let me now convey the same thing, a similar idea, but through a space-time diagram. let us try to understand this. Okay, so here we have two observers, A and B, but unlike before, they are in relative motion. Okay, so in A's rest frame, A's trajectory or world line is an upward pointing straight line. Okay, so this is in A's frame, we are drawing this. So A doesn't move in A's frame, and therefore A's world line is an upward pointing straight line. All right, now B is moving relative to A. So her world line, and let us suppose that B and A meet at some instant, at some place. Yeah, so B is walking on the road and A is standing at a point on the road. So B would meet A at some point of time. That event of meeting happens over here at a certain time on A's clock and B's clock, suppose. At a certain common location, they both meet. And then B goes on her way, continues towards the right. But suppose B is moving uniformly relative to A. Yeah, moves uniformly and uniformly at a speed less than the speed of light relative to A. Yeah, and therefore the world line of B would be inclined in this manner because B is proceeding to other locations as far as A is concerned. And since B is not going at the speed of light, but rather less than the speed of light, B would cover a lesser distance in unit time than light would cover. Okay, and therefore the world line of B is at an acute angle to A, to that of A, whereas light would be at 45 degrees to A. And if you are traveling faster than the speed of light, it would be at some obtuse angle, which we are not considering. So this is how we draw the world line of B. B is an observer who moves at a uniform velocity relative to A, and that uniform velocity is less than the speed of light. So any question about how we drew these two world lines? Okay, now let us try to examine the simultaneity of two events. All right. So E1 and E2 are pair of events. Now, okay, so I have to shrink this a little bit so that we can read what is written here. So let me read this so that you're on the same page as me. Observer B moves at a uniform velocity less than the speed of light relative to observer A. So their world lines, which are drawn by represented by solid lines, are inclined at an angle less than 45 degrees. 45 degrees would be light. Okay, so now time as measured on their clocks increases upwards along their world lines. That is the setup. Now they meet at the event E. So at the event E, the two world lines intersect. So they meet over there. Now at that event of meeting, they do something interesting. Both of them send light signals, which are represented by these dashed lines, to events E1 and E2. Okay, so they're both together there, and they are both going to send light signals out towards events E1 and E2, which are then sent back. Okay, so they both send light signals. Those reach certain events E1 and E2 and are reflected back. Now suppose the events E1 and E2 are simultaneous according to A. So that would be what this picture designates, is conveys, because the light signal that went out to E2 came back to A's world line at the same time as the one that E1 returned. Okay, so A will declare using the radar method that E1 and E2 occur simultaneously with the event EA on A's world line that is located over here. Okay, so remember previously we were able to tell an event on A's world line which is simultaneous with any given event. So in this case, E1 and E2 are both simultaneous with EA. Right? Okay, so A declares that E1 and E2 are simultaneous. Now let us see what B says. So A says that they are simultaneous because he receives the returned signals at the same time on his clock. But this is not the case as reckoned by B. So B unfortunately disagrees. Let us see when B receives the returned signals. According to B, the signal from E2, which B sent out here, is going to return at this time on B's clock. This event on B's clock is going to be the one at which B receives the signal from E2. On the other hand, the signal from E1 comes to B much later according to B's clock. All right. So B is going to say that E2 precedes E1 according to B. Okay. B is doing the same thing as A. B is sending out signals, receiving them, dividing the time by 2, and determining the time at which a simultaneous event on B's world line happened with E2. Okay. Same way B does it for E1. Unfortunately, these two times for B do not coincide. Okay, so the events E1 and E2 are simultaneous for A, but not for B. Okay, so that is the story. I hope you are able to follow. If you did not follow this approach, please look at the guard in the wagon. That also conveys similar idea. Yes, please.
Sir, I mean, just out of curiosity,
Yeah.
for a world line which has this slope more than 45 degrees,
Okay.
just if we imagine.
Yes,
the
yes, something like
light
this.
ray, this light ray never reaches back to it.
No, we cannot even call it a light ray. I mean, light travels at speed of light, which we are working here in units where C is 1. That's why I said 45 degrees.
Yes, sir.
Yes, go ahead.
No,
So that this trajectory, this world line is not that of light. It is some.
Yes, sir. It is not of line,
Right.
not of light.
Yes.
Like for a random trajectory with more than
Mhm.
slope than 45 degree,
Mhm.
he sends out a light ray, and it never like reaches back to it. So does that mean that E2 never happens for that particular trajectory? Like, it's just a hypothetical question.
No, I haven't quite followed the question, but I mean, the long and short of it is that we are not aware of any scheme by which A can send a signal that has such a world line. In other words, we don't have access to particles that travel faster than the speed of light. I think that is what you are asking, whether you can have such a world line at all. The answer is no.
No, sir. I mean, like, if B travels with speed more than of light, like hypothetically, like,
okay, fine, yeah.
and then B sends out a signal, then how it like never goes back to B, right?
Okay. All right. Okay. So you are saying that B's world line, this is some kind of B's world line, or let me call it B prime's world line or something.
Yes.
Okay, so B prime is some kind of superluminal observer, and you are asking about what kind of light signals B prime can send out. Okay. Is that roughly what you're asking?
Yes, sir. I mean, like, I was asking, like, from seeing it, I think like B prime never observes E2. Like in that frame, E2 never happens. I think that
yeah. Okay, you may be right. I should draw this carefully. You may be right that. Okay. See, I haven't yet discussed causality, but these matters will come up in that context. Yeah, there are certain events that are causally connected to an observer, that is, to which the observer can communicate or receive communications from. There are certain events which certain observers simply cannot access. And so you are quite right. There are events which certain observers cannot access. Which ordinary observers who travel less than the speed of light You are now going to the opposite situation where you're looking at an observer who is traveling faster than the speed of light and asking whether he can access certain events that we can access. I think it is true that they also cannot access what you say sounds reasonable. I mean, I would have to draw it carefully and examine. Yeah, so okay, so I haven't looked at it carefully or understood exactly what your figure looks like, but I tend to agree with you. Yeah, but I think it will be good once we talk about causality, then there will be additional framework to discuss these things. Yes, Rooptak.
Yes, I just wanted to confirm, like, B assigns time to E1 and E2 by like it's like taking the difference of that. I mean, taking the average of the time. Yes.
Correct, exactly. There is some TB2. This is TB1. Yeah, and now B is going to assign a time to E1 as the average of TB1 and TB2. Is that what you're asking?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Exactly, you are correct. Same way, B is going to assign a time to E2 as the average of TB3 and TB1, namely the sending and receiving times on B's clock for that event.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Precisely, yeah, you're correct.
Yes, thank you, sir.
Yeah, and the point is that those two times for E1 and E2 are not the same. Okay, very good. You got the point. Any other question?
Yes, sir. I had a few
Yes,
questions.
Gautam.
A bit confused.
Yes.
So the space-time diagram, we would need to draw this with respect to some frame, right? So is this with
A's rest frame?
A's
We are
frame?
drawing in A's rest frame. That is why A's trajectory is upward pointing straight line.
Okay. In that case, how are we able to make conclusions about what B is perceiving?
Using the radar method. See, B does what B always does. To determine the time of an event, B simply, see whether B is moving relative to A or not is not relevant. Go back to our previous discussion. How does an observer assign times to events? Procedure is very simple. Simply send out light signal, let it reach the event, come back to you, divide that time elapsed by 2 and tell that is the time it took. Yeah, that's all. So whether B is moving relative to A is irrelevant. In fact, there is no meaning to talking about whether B is moving or not. B is simply an inertial observer that can send out light signals to various events. Gautam, can you expand on your question or?
Yes, sir. I think my confusion is that okay, I think this idea itself that I'm having is wrong. So it's sort of the idea that so light moves at C for everything, every observer.
Exactly.
So wouldn't it make some sort of, yes, sir?
Yeah. See, an event is simply something that happens somewhere at some instant. All right. We are not talking about the motion of that event or anything of that sort. B is simply an observer. B is, according to B is located somewhere. Yeah. In B's rest frame, B doesn't move anywhere. B is free to be sending out light signals all the time. They will go and reach various events all over the place and come back to B. And B will note down the time at which the signal was sent, time at which signal was received, take the average of those two and assign that as the time of that event. That's all. We are not concerned at all with whether B is moving relative to some other third party and all. It's all irrelevant.
Okay. I think I will need to think about this more. But one more question I had, which is as a follow-up to Shubham's question on B prime moving faster than the speed of light. So it would seem that, like he said and like you said, it would seem that B prime cannot access certain events, like cannot get a signal from E1. But in B prime's frame, light is still moving at C relative to B prime. So shouldn't light still be coming at B very fast? But am I mixing things up?
Yeah, no, I think let us not go into this because it will unnecessarily confuse us. Let us right now focus on observers who move at speeds less than the speed of light, and understand that situation first. Let us get that part straight first. Excuse me if I am preventing you from imagining other things. But it's important we first understand, I mean, the type of question you asked before, it's a much more important thing to have straight and understood than speculation about what B will or will not see if B is moving faster than the speed of light. We can try to draw a diagram for that separately.
Okay,
okay. Or let me put it differently. Certain events cannot be accessed by A, and they would be okay. Now, I think it's really best discussed after we talk about causality. Then we will have yet more structure to the space-time diagram. And at that stage, let us look at this once again.
Okay, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. But any other question right now?
Not from me right now,
okay.
sir. I'll
any
think about
other
this
students? More. Yeah. I think your first question is very pertinent, and it is your confusion mainly arises because this line looks a bit oblique, but that's because it's being drawn in A's frame. According to B, in B's frame, B's world line is simply vertical. Yeah, and the process that B is following is very straightforward. Send light signals, receive them, make the average time calculation. That's all. Compare two such events that way. So somebody else was asking, Shashwat, Asthana, yes?
Sir, can you explain the a man on the wagon once again?
Yes. That is a good question. Man on the wagon is a very, very important example worth understanding and having good control over. Even before one addresses space-time diagrams, because this is how Einstein started to think. So what are we doing? We are trying to demonstrate that two events may be simultaneous for the guard, but not simultaneous for station master. Okay, this is the main point. All right. Now, as far as guard is concerned, guard sends out a light signal in all directions, in particular towards the back of the wagon and towards the front of the wagon. According to the guard, who is simply at rest in the frame of the wagon, guard is not walking in the train or anything, the two light signals will reach the two ends of the wagon, which are equidistant as far as the guard is concerned. The two events we are concerned with is the arrival of the light signal at the back of the train and in the front of the train. According to guard, they occur simultaneously because the back and front of the wagon are at the same distance because guard is standing in the middle of the wagon. Those two time of travel are given by L upon C, each of them. So Shashwat, are you okay with this frames
yes, sir.
Study? Okay, now let us proceed to the station master's frame. In the station master's frame, the train is moving. Let us say the train is moving to the left. Okay, so train which was originally here, according to the station master, when I say originally, when the station master observes that when this person has sent out a light signal, let us suppose. Then after some time, the train has moved to the left, and the left end of the wagon has reached this location according to station master. Right end of the wagon has also advanced and reached this location. Yeah. Now, the light is traveling this way to reach the right end, and light is traveling this way to reach the left end. According to the station master, the right end of the wagon has advanced, reducing the distance that the light has to travel to reach it. Therefore, according to the station master, light takes a shorter duration to reach the right end of the wagon, which has reached this location. On the other hand, the left end of the wagon has moved more to the left, and therefore the light has to cover a greater distance, will therefore take longer time. Therefore, the arrival times at the left and right ends of the wagon are not the same according to the station master.
Yes, sir. Got understood.
Okay, very good. Yeah. Okay, so I encourage you to read this once again and think of it yourself also. Yeah, and of course I made some assumptions that the speed is so, I mean, the wagon doesn't pass the, yeah, I mean, my picture is made in such a way that the right end of the wagon has not, has only reached up to here. Okay, no, actually there is no, I'm sorry, I take that back. The picture is fairly representative. Anyway, I encourage you to read this once again and convince yourself also that the arrival times at the two ends of the wagon are not the same according to the station master. Okay, any other questions?
So how exactly did light come into the picture?
Because we are, so the way we assign times to events is using light signals. So light in this particular example came because the wagon, the station, sorry, the guard is switching on a light pulse, letting it go. So that's where it came from.
No, so like, as in, why only light? To assign.
Okay. Well, because it is convenient and it has a common speed for all observers, so it's particularly convenient. Yeah, you do raise a good point. Why not use some other type of particle, send it and receive it and so on? Yeah, you could do that. You could do that and see how things differ for different observers. The point is that things become complicated because the speed of a massive particle, as we will see, is not the same for all observers. The principle of relativity only tells us that the speed of light is the same for all observers. So many calculations simplify if you use light as a kind of measuring device. So it's, yeah.
When we call observers, we particularly only use our eye sense, that is one we get by light. If some organism would have only the sound sense, then would have that been the case that only the sound speed would have mattered or something like that. Like, I mean, the definition of observation is dependent upon light. Is that only the case, or there's something more to it?
Okay, no, you do raise a good point. We are able to perceive light, so we use light. Yeah, but no, I think this can be done even by blind people. They just need to use some scientific devices, which can send and receive light. Yeah, and that scientific, that measuring instrument will have to convey the sending time and receiving time to the observer, even if the observer was blind. The point is that we can use microwaves, you can use X-rays, you can use gamma rays to do this. You don't need to use visible light. So for most of us, we will not see the X-ray at all. I mean, it simply kill us. Yeah, yeah. So it's not dependent on whether we can see it with our eyes or not. It is really using the principle of relativity that says that electromagnetic waves or light travels at a particular speed for all observers. We are only exploiting that. If you had observers who simply could not measure this, receive and send light signals, that kind of observer will unfortunately be very much challenged to study relativity. That set of observer is at a great disadvantage.
Sir, and another thing,
yes,
like, is there an existing theory which actually tells us that why speed of light should not change when you change observers? Like, why it should be constant, or is just a postulate? An experimental fact.
It is an experimental fact. Okay, so we do not have, we create a theory in which this is accommodated. The history went in a slightly different way, that a theory for electromagnetism was created, and lo and behold, in that theory, it turned out that light was an electromagnetic wave and happened to have the light speed which was independent of observer, and same for all frames. So, I don't know if I can say that we have a theory that predicts that the speed of light should be frame independent constant. Such a theory already exists. It's a Maxwell's equation. So to some extent, that is already there. But finally, it comes down to an experimental fact. And if it was not through the experiment, then we will have to develop a different theory where speed of light was not a constant.
And sir, in Maxwell's theory also, isn't it, because somehow you involve the ideas of relativity without knowing that you are using, right?
Maybe, yeah. I don't know how I want to respond to that. Okay, it is a miracle that Maxwell's equations do describe electromagnetic waves, of which light is an example, and that they do they do predict that light has a certain common speed. Yeah, so no, the historical thing is complete the opposite. Nobody knew about relativity. They just knew about how charges affect each other, how magnetic fields affect currents, and so on. And they built a theory for that. And the output of that theory was that there are waves which travel at this fixed speed. That's how it happened. And the remarkable thing is that nobody knew that Maxwell's equations have this property at all. It was discovered only after special relativity. That Maxwell's equations are Lorentz invariant was only understood even after special relativity. So the history is quite peculiar. Maxwell did not know that Maxwell's equations are Lorentz invariant. Lorentz transformations had not even been invented till the 20th century. Yeah, I mean,
yes, sir.
Yeah, so the
Einstein was born in the same year in which Maxwell died. So yeah.
Okay, so thank you. Okay, anyway, I think you have asked a good point, but yeah, to the extent possible, I have commented on that. Any other questions? Okay. All right. Let us now proceed then to what I said, Lorentz transformations. That is the missing link right now. That is, we wish to relate coordinates of an event as observed in two inertial frames in uniform relative motion. This is the objective. Yeah. Galilean transformations do not do the job. So let me remind you what Galilean transformations are. I think if I have not written it here, let me remind you. So Galilean transformations relate the coordinates of an event t, x, y, z, or t, comma, r in one frame S to that in another frame where they are denoted t prime, comma, r prime. Now the two frames S prime moves at speed v relative to S along x. Suppose that is the setup. Then we will say that t prime is equal to t according to Galileo. Times are absolute. They are the same according to Newton. And y prime is equal to y, z prime equal to z, but x prime is equal to x minus vt. Yeah, I'm sorry. X prime is equal to x minus vt, provided s and s prime coincide at t equal to t prime equal to 0. Suppose the origins coincide, the axes coincide at t equal to t prime equal to 0. So the systems were coincident initially, and then s and s prime were coincident, and then s prime moved to the right later on. Galilean transformations say that the times are identical, the spatial coordinates in orthogonal directions are unchanged, but the spatial coordinate along the direction of motion is related in this manner, x prime equal to x minus vt. So this is called a Galilean transformation. We did examine what this would imply for the speed of light in the two frames, and we arrived at a contradiction. That is, the speed of light would be c minus v, and that contradicts the principle of relativity, second postulate. Sorry, the second postulate of relativity. Now, Einstein found a new transformation law. By transformation law, I mean a map between x, y, z, t and x prime, y prime, z prime, t prime. Okay, a certain transformation that ensures that the speed of light is the same in both frames. This transformation is called a Lorentz transformation, since a similar transformation had been introduced by Lorentz in an attempt to explain the Michelson-Morley null result. So Lorentz had introduced a similar thing. So it is called the Lorentz transformation. Yeah, actually, I don't think Lorentz had the full transformation. He basically, the length contraction formula, in effect, he had something to that effect, because he was really talking about the arm of an interferometer being shortened and so on. We will derive the full Lorentz, the details now. But Lorentz is a highly respected physicist, and Einstein had a very high regard for him, and he was in a national hero in some ways. And as I understand, when Lorentz died in Leiden, in the Netherlands, as a mark of respect to him, the city switched off all lights in the evening for some duration of time, to observe and pay respect to Lorentz. And Einstein held him in very high regard. And Lorentz did many things in physics, not just Lorentz transformation. Okay, so let us go back to the setup we had introduced. As before, suppose we have two inertial frames, S and S prime, with them coinciding at t and t prime equal to 0. So they coincide, and then S prime moves to the right at some speed v, so velocity v along the positive x-axis. Given any event, it has coordinates in the primed and unprimed frames. We need to know the relation between the two. Now, let us see how we argue. The simplest possibility is to take the transformation to be linear, like the Galilean transformation. Galilean transformation is also linear, right? T prime equal to t is identity. X prime is equal to x minus vt. This is also linear in x and t. Y prime equal to y. Z prime equal to z. So this is Galilean transform. So it's linear. That is, x appears to first power, t appears to first power. V is simply a parameter. All right. The simplest possibility to take the Lorentz transformation to be linear. Why? Because a nonlinear transformation could lead to an acceleration of a particle in S prime, even if its velocity were constant in S. Okay. Suppose we make some nonlinear transformation, then a particle which is traveling at constant speed in S may be perceived as traveling at a non-constant speed in S prime, and therefore would be said to be accelerating, even though S is saying that it is a free particle. Okay. Now, this would violate Newton's first law, because these are two inertial frames, and we are being conservative and trying to retain to the extent possible the basic idea of Newton's first law. Okay, so Einstein is not throwing out Newton's first law. Free particles in a pair of inertial frames are still expected to follow straight line trajectories at constant speed. This principle we are not throwing out, Newton's first law. So Einstein tried to create special relativity in the most conservative way possible, without discarding Newton's first law. Okay. Now, since the motion is only along the x direction, that is the motion of the frame S prime, we begin with the most general linear transformation that does not affect the y and z coordinates. Okay, I will explain why that is done. So we are going to suppose that x prime is related to the unprimed variables via this formula. X prime is ax plus bt, y prime equal to y, z prime equal to z. So the orthogonal directions are spectators, and t prime again is some linear function of x and t. T prime is some ct plus dt. Sorry, cx plus dt. Okay, so this is the most general linear transformation that does not affect the y and z coordinates and is also not affected by them. So x prime doesn't depend on y and z, for instance. Yeah. We will further assume that d is positive. This coefficient d that relates t prime to t, we will assume it's positive. Such a transformation will be called orthochronous, so that the arrow of time, namely past to future with increasing time, is the same for both observers. What we mean is that if x is held fixed and t increases, t prime will also increase. That is what we want to maintain, that the arrow of time is the same for both observers. All right, so for that reason, we will assume that d is positive. We don't want for S prime sort of their time to be running in the opposite way, backwards relative to S. So this will be what we will get finally will be called an orthochronous Lorentz transformation. But we are not there yet. Okay, now I need to give a short justification for this ignoring any change in y and z. Okay, so here is a thought experiment to justify the assumption that y and z are not affected by the motion in the x direction. So this is a slight detour. Okay, any question so far about this linear transformation? Just the formulae. Okay, let me come to this thought experiment. Okay, suppose there is an arch. Okay, so there is a railway line here. There is an arch here. An arch. This railway line runs along the x-axis. Let us suppose an arch of height h along the railway line in the y direction. Let us suppose this is the y direction. Now a stick of height h fits exactly into the arch as indicated. So this is the stick. It is also of height h. It fits exactly into the arch when placed there at rest. Okay. So in the rest frame of the railway track and of the arch, a stick at rest placed vertically will just fit into the arch. Okay. Now let us suppose that the stick approaches the arch along the track at some speed v. So suppose the stick is approaching the arch at some speed v. And let us suppose that the y coordinate is affected by this relative velocity. Okay. Previously we said that the y coordinate is unaffected. I am giving some justification for this. So let us work through reductio ad absurdum. That is, we will suppose that the perpendicular direction is affected, coordinates in perpendicular direction are affected. So suppose the y coordinate is affected by the boost along x, then relative to the arch, the top of the moving stick would not have height h, it will have some other height. Let us call that height h prime. And for definiteness, let us suppose that h prime is greater than h. Similar argument can be made when h prime is less than h. So let us suppose that the moving stick So the stick is moving along x at velocity v, but its height somehow looks to be more than the height of the arch according to the railway track frame. Then from the rest frame of the arch, the moving stick cannot pass through. Okay, that is what the arch would say. I cannot admit this stick. However, viewed from the frame of the stick, the arch would approach the stick at the same speed v. Okay. We go now to the frame of the stick. The rest frame of the stick, the arch is approaching at speed v. Because of our assumption, the stick would say that the arch appears to have a height h prime greater than that of the stick. Okay. They're using exactly the same reasoning to say that since the arch is approaching the stick, the arch must now have a different height, a height h prime greater than that of the stick, allowing the stick to pass through the arch. Okay. We have viewed the same process through the eyes of the two different observers. Now, these two conclusions contradict each other. Thus, we must have h equal to h prime. Okay, you have to do a similar argument when h prime is less than h, you'll get a similar thing. and therefore, after doing that, one concludes that h prime must be equal to h. In other words, dimensions perpendicular to the direction of motion are not affected by the Lorentz transformation. Whatever this Lorentz transformation is, it must not affect directions perpendicular to the direction of motion. So this is our little thought experiment to justify these two formulae. Okay, all right, I'm now out of time. So we will continue next time. What is our aim here on? It is to somehow fix the constants A, B, C, D, yeah, which could depend on the velocity of the relative velocity between the frames. Somehow we have to fix these constants so that once we fix them, we will have our Lorentz transformation. Okay, so we are going to do that by comparing the coordinates of certain distinguished events when you view them from both the frames, and also by requiring that the speed of light is the same in both frames. So anyway, I will go over this once again next time. That is our objective to be done on Thursday. Okay, so that is all we have time for today. Any questions right now? Okay. Regarding the homework on assignment 8, I have updated the problem sheet just with some clarifications, mentioning that in the third problem, you only need to compute v squared upon c squared. That is all you are expected to do. And in the first problem, you have to give a qualitative reasoning and implications for the solution for the linear differential equation for phi. So those who have attempted it will know what I'm talking about. But anyway, I have updated the problem sheet based on some queries from various students. Okay, so let us stop here then. I wish you a good afternoon and have a nice lunch.
Sorry, sir.
Yes, please. Yeah.
Sir, at the start of the lecture, I spoke to you about the notes. You said we'll talk at the end of the lecture.
Okay, so that let us have our conversation separately. I will. Please just.
Do you want me to send you a mail?
Yes. Could you please send me an email? Then.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll send you an email.
All right. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. If not. Thank you for joining, and we will meet on Thursday morning.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, you're welcome.